Hey there, Amplifiers. Thanks for joining in. We have an awesome segment today. You know, what we're going to be talking about is how to keep up with customer expectations. And this is actually a great book. Our guest today is the author, Mr. Brad Cleveland, and I will be introducing him in a moment. But let's start off by setting the stage. What's the big idea? Well, number one, customer expectations are constantly evolving. We have technology, we have automation, we have just trends in the market. We've got to be aware that this is happening. Because why? Well, 81% of customers say that customer service falls short of expectations. Why is that a big deal? Well, 58% will leave after one bad experience. So if we're not paying attention to our customer service, we could be dropping the ball, putting a lot of time and attention into things, and then really not getting the result that we're looking for. So the key, you got to get customer service right. And there's a process to do that. If you don't get it right, you may not survive. So that's why it's important to tune in. This is for business owners looking to amplify their business. And our guest today is definitely an expert when it comes to customer service. If you're tuning in now, just make sure that to amplify, to get the most out of these segments, ask questions. We will monitor questions, whether it's the live or the recorded version. Ask questions. We'll try to get them to the author so we can make sure that we're getting your questions answered. Share your comments. We want to hear from you as well. And take action. Don't just hear these ideas. Put them into action. They will help you amplify your business. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our guest for today's segment. Brad Cleveland is one of the world's foremost experts in customer strategy and management. He's a sought-after speaker and consultant. He has worked in 45 states and over 60 countries for today's customer experience trailblazers, including American Express, Apple, USAA, Google, and others. His new book is Leading the Customer Experience, How to Chart a Course and Deliver Outstanding Results. So I'd like to welcome to Growth Amplifiers, Brad Cleveland.
Hi, Kenny. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. And really, really great to be with you.
It's glad to have you here and glad to have you guest on this show. It's really awesome. You're doing some amazing things, had some amazing experiences. In a moment, we'll get into the heart of the conversation. But for right now, if you could just let the audience know a little bit about your backstory, how you got into this work in the first place, that'd be great.
Yeah. I'd love to say it was some strategic plan back in the day, but a lot of serendipity and walking through doors that opened. In the earliest days of my career, I worked in various technology and customer service roles and was always drawn to customer service and customer experience. And just a real quick story, I worked as an installer in a tech company, one of my earliest jobs, and some really cool technology. And I got roasted one day by my supervisor for leaving fingerprints on a customer's monitor. I mean, he's like, this is our reputation and this is their experience. And I just got dressed down. And I thought about it. It was one of the best things that ever could have happened. It wasn't the only time I got a talking to. and I started to get it. Like, yeah, this all adds up. Fingerprints on a monitor. You can have a system that costs them, they're investing millions of dollars in, and fingerprints on the monitor are what they notice. So I was drawn to customer experience and customer service, all little things and big things. I went on later to become a founding partner in the International Customer Management Institute,
wow.
ICMI, and I had the privilege of serving there as CEO for well over, I think it was 12, 13 years. And that opened all kinds of doors, really had a front row seat into what these amazing organizations were doing and what worked and what didn't. So it's been a fun journey. And today I'm speaking and consulting and doing some writing and really, really enjoying it. I love working with organizations that want to differentiate. They want to create great experiences, they want to ensure that their brand is really shining through in everything they do. And when that happens, great things happen. So love that.
You made a good point there. You mentioned branding, and my background in marketing and some branding. We talk about it's important to have a good brand, but I think it's even probably more so important to have a great customer experience. Because if you're just putting out an image for the sake of the image, but you can't deliver with the experience, it's not going to hold water. It doesn't have the same weight to it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And ultimately your brand is what others perceive you to be. What are you made of? What values do you really stand by? How well do you support them when things, might not go exactly like they're supposed to go? So it all adds up and it all becomes a part of your brand.
So I'm excited. You've got some great content, and I'm really tickled to have picked up a copy of your book. Now, one thing, this is a really good book. I've got a lot of books. You can't really see them right here now, but there's my little library of books, as a lot of people have, and I'm an avid reader. And not all books are created equally. Some are very wordy. Some are like, this doesn't even say anything. Your book is actually very nicely structured and has a lot of great content that is actionable and insightful. So super props to you for having such an awesome book. And I'm going to make sure that we put that in the comments so people can score a copy.
Oh, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate that. It was due mid last year, and so the kind of the closing, the home stretch of the book, and the writing, the final decisions on which case studies would make the cut, COVID tumbled the world. So I got together with a publisher, and we decided this is not the time to wrap this thing up. Let's let things play out. And it was the best thing that ever could happen, because we really had to go for principles. We dropped some case studies that might have been obsolete today. Assumptions about a different world than we're in, and I really had to live. Some of the principles that we wrote about in that book. We were forced to really go with those things that are going to stay. They've got staying power, and that we have to do in good times and tough times.
So, as we're tuning in, here's kind of like the overlay of where I thought we could go with this conversation today. So, number one, what to look for. What are some warning signs that maybe businesses should start looking out for? Some things that maybe are telling them that we could have issues. Now, there are obviously some ones if you have a lot of issues coming up already, but some things to look for before there's a lot of problems. Then we can go into 5 steps leaders can take to immediately chart a course towards customer loyalty and results. And then I was thinking we could kind of end on, why leading the customer experience, why amplifiers should pick up a copy of this book, why it'd be great. Now, I can endorse it, but you could probably speak to some good points that would be really helpful for those who are looking to improve their customer experience, and go from there. Sound good?
That sounds perfect.
All right, my friend. So let's start off with, what should we be looking for? Now, obviously, if we're getting bad reviews and there's customer complaints coming in all over the place, yeah, we've got a problem. But what are some things we could look for ahead of that? What are some things we could be paying attention to ahead of that may give us an indication that we got some work to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a few things that come immediately to mind. And one, let me just, before I even try to mention a few things that you'd want to do more routinely, trust your intuition as a leader. You probably have a pretty good sense of, are you innovating? Are you where you need to be? It's the walking through the kitchen in your restaurant sort of parallel. What's going on behind the scenes. So trust your intuition. Your employees, the employee experience really is the cornerstone of customer experience. So what are they saying? And talk to, every part of your organization, every level, from the loading dock to design areas to accounting to customer service, and ask them how it's going. These don't have to be formal, statistically valid surveys. You can do that. I recommend that. There's a place for that. go through that in the book. But just informal discussions. What are you seeing? How are we doing? And these you can really triangulate with these discussions and get a good read on what's happening well before you start to see things show up in customer surveys. By all means, look at surveys, but what are all the other ways your customers are trying to tell you what's happening? The social media, which can be the Wild West and a lot of bad manners, a lot of clutter, but there may be some really good things there that we can learn from. So take a look at social media. How are customers behaving? They're going to vote with their feet. Are they buying? Are they not? Are they staying with you? Are some jumping ship? There's just all sorts of data points in your operations and in customer behavior that go well beyond surveys. We're also over surveyed. So I recommend get around a flip chart with your team, just a small cross section of your team. Like, what are all the ways we can listen to the market? And you'll come up with a dozen right off the bat. Give it another half hour, you'll come up with 24 more ways that you can listen. There will be some real ahas there. And then look for ways to, without a big process and a bunch of time, look for ways to begin to pull that information into your organization and act on it.
I'm a big fan of small hinges swinging big doors. It's the little things, the little differences all add up to a big impact. I think you made a great point right there, Brad, where sometimes we think, oh, we've got all this things we want to change and so much that we've got to wrestle with. But as you just mentioned, you could come up with some ideas and just start taking little pieces and parts and work with the ones that are going to give the most impact and that would be the easiest to implement without getting concerned trying to get everything solved out the gate.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, Kenny, that you're really making is don't, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but don't look for perfection. Just get going, just get started. And you may not have the perfect tools. You may not have, every process in place yet that you want for listening to the market, but get started. Use what you have. Get as far as fast as you can. We want success, not perfection. There's no such thing as perfection in listening to the market. It's art and science.
So, and I really applaud also just taking the time to ask your internal team. You have one perspective, but other people in different roles are going to have different perspectives. They're going to see things maybe you didn't. And just taking advantage of, hey, if we're all working together to improve, that's a lot of great ideas coming together. So really cool. So now if people are getting the awareness, they're starting to get an idea of, there's some things we could do to improve. Next, I've got the 5 steps leaders can take to immediately chart a course to customer loyalty and results. So thinking about what are some action steps that people could take to start getting this and taking action there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll be quick with these. Maybe a little story on this first one because it can get some eye rolls, like the obligatory, But the first is to have a compelling vision. And when I ran my organizations, I have to admit I didn't discount vision. I always knew it was important. But get vision in place. Check that box. Move on. It's really important, and how we go at it is really important. So. Just a quick story, and this was just before COVID, but I'm with an organization. They're launching their customer experience initiative, and I was one of the speakers that morning, and it all built up to a session that afternoon where they went through how they were going to go at this. And 2 speakers probably spent, I think it was 75 minutes and went through 30 or 40 slides. And there's lots of metrics and lots of terms, CX and NPS, Net Promoter Score, and all these different things. And they wrapped up, and it was coffee break time. And I was in the back of the room, so I was first out the door, and there were 2 people behind me. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't not hear what they were saying. And one's leaning over to the other. Did you get all of that? And the other responded, not really. I just hope it doesn't add much time because I am swamped right now. I'm thinking, oh no, my goodness, this whole day, that huge investment, bringing all these people into that big meeting room, and yeah, and they missed. And there's some bandwidth with that sort of thing. Just you can't circle back very elegantly and say, well, let's do a redo on that. Let's really focus on vision, because we missed it by focusing on all these metrics and all the detail. Vision's key. You think of Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, or Richard Branson, any business, Emily Weiss, any business leader you admire, they're not talking net promoter score. They're probably not even using the term customer experience as we would more formally. They're creating vision that captures everybody. Like, wow, that's cool. Let's go make a difference in the world. So have a vision and there's a whole, most of chapter 1 is on vision, some example visions. There's some really great examples from government organizations and small entrepreneurial startups and the big multinationals. You can be any size of organization from a one-person operation on up. Have a vision. So that's number 1 of the 5.
I think that's incredible. And you mentioned something that I over communicate, and I do that intentionally, is how easy it is to think, oh, I've heard this before, or I know that already. But it doesn't matter what you know. It matters the results that you're getting, what you're putting into action. Is it working for you? And if you think you've got everything the best it possibly can be, that's when you limit your growth. So keep an open mind. There's always a way to improve. And there's ideas in this book that could definitely help you do that. So if you just have a vision, but it's not serving your team as best as it could be, then definitely tune in and think about how you can apply that. So that was a great story. I appreciate that. So that was number 1. What would be number 2?
Yeah. So number 2 is tap the innovation of your team. They've got the goods, and we may have to rethink quality standards that we've established. We may have to rethink, empowerment and what we're really enabling and empowering them to do, but they're seeing firsthand what's happening. So there's a large organization that really didn't have any way to capture the insight from their employee base across the board. And they created a very simple app that you can open up. Anybody can open up and submit, hey, I just heard this, or here's what I'm seeing. It all funnels to the central repository along with customer surveys and other formal things they're doing. It's been such a win for them. And then they circle back, like, here's how we're using this. Thank you very much for what you're contributing, what you're seeing. And it's become a really fun part of their culture. Everyone really knows how important they are and how important their visibility is. So that's number 2. Number 3 is to cast a wide net of listening. And again, surveys are going to continue to have a place. We are all so over surveyed. So that's just a part of it. Talking to customers firsthand, and by all means, and I'm speaking to myself as much as anyone, but be out there talking firsthand. The late Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines used to wander the airports and take flights, and he'd just blend in and talk to customers. And I see that with the leaders that are getting the best results. They're intentional about that. Spend a little time on social media and what others are saying. You have to have some internal fortitude to do that, because the manners aren't great, and there's just a lot of clutter in the social world. But there's also some things we may need to hear. So spend some time there. Look at operational data. How's that going? Again, make that flip chart list of all the ways you can listen. So that's number 3. Number 4 is build a team around 10 customer expectations. And we go through these in the book. There's good news on customer expectations. You'd think, well, we just have no idea where they're going, right? The world's changing so fast. There's so much disruption. And the good news is there are 10 expectations customers have of organizations that we've found over, and I'll date myself, I've been studying this for 30 years now. They're not changing. Things like be accessible. I need to get through to someone. Be accessible. Treat me courteously. Be responsive. Do what I need promptly. Those core expectations aren't changing. Now, what is changing, of course, is what is being accessible.
Right.
It looks a little different today than it did even 5 years ago, certainly 10 or 15 years ago. So we've got to think through how these apply, but the expectations, thank goodness they're so solid, and we can keep those front and center with our team and continue to build out, services and processes that work well. And then number 5 is build a supporting process to address problem areas. And any organization, the best of the best have areas that aren't perfect. They're working on them. Amazon, Apple, Starbucks, I can tell you a few key areas they're focused on right now that aren't quite right. And they know they're not quite right. And they're as critical as anyone on areas that need improvement. So create a culture where you continue to support those process areas that need attention.
So there you go. 5 steps. So I suggest, if you haven't been taking notes, you always should be taking notes. But if you're just listening along, think about one of those that you could immediately just begin improving upon. Pick one and do something with it, right? You got to start somewhere. But
that's right.
It's too easy just to listen and say, oh, that's nice. But if you even just took one little idea and moved it forward, it'd be very valuable. Speaking of value, so I've got this cool book, Leading the Customer Experience. Now, people have books. Some people have told me I'm too busy to read. Well, it's about not reading for the sake of enjoyment. It's about growing. It's about gaining ideas and knowledge that you can put into action and have an impact. So for people that are maybe hearing of this book for the first time, why should they consider picking up a copy?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm wondering where do I even dive in and do my reading? There's so much content coming out all the time. We tried to create a resource that put it all together. So there's a ton of books out there on customer experience, and I didn't want to go in and say, oh, this is different, better, whatever than any other. It's just that many of those books have specific angles in the customer experience, but don't tell the whole story. So we wanted to tell the whole story, from vision in chapter 1 to how you keep the process going. I recognize that process.
Right.
So it puts it all together, and you don't have to read the darn thing and implement everything in there by next Tuesday. You can open it up. It's very symmetrical in the sense that there are 10 chapters and 5 recommendations in each chapter. And we didn't start out trying, let's come up with that's very crunchy. Let's do 50 recommendations on customer experience. That'd be overwhelming. But it just so happened the way that this thing kind of wrote itself. It's a corny expression, but this book really was trying to speak as we were working on it, and it turned out to have these 5 recommendations across 10 chapters. So you can pick it up and get a really quick, good sense of where you are. Yeah, we got that going well, and that area really needs attention. And then you can jump in where you need. We wanted it to be academically grounded. There's a lot of research out there, but fresh and easy to read. That was our intention. So to really make it customer experience accessible to a broad audience. So hopefully you can hand it to anybody on your team. They might supervise a small team, they might run a division, and they would get a good sense of what is customer experience, what are all the components that go into it.
I really love how it's broken out. It's easy to read, and I always love when there's actionable insights. Here's something that you could do. If you could just do one thing, it would be take these actions. So definitely, if you're interested in learning more about Brad, he has a website, bradcleveland.com. But if you're interested in getting a copy of the book, we've got a link for that as well. It's bit.ly. I'll just put it in here. Cleveland Rocks. Cleveland Dash Rocks.
I'm blushing a little.
So, yeah, that's That's really cool. I thought that was fun. But that'll go to the Amazon store and pick up a copy. So I highly suggest, if you take the information of customer experience to heart and realize that, a business is successful when they provide a great experience to their customers. They get more positive reviews. They get more referrals. They get more clients from word of mouth when they provide a great experience. And for those who are interested in doing marketing or growing the business, providing a really good experience is a really good place to start. So feel free to pick up a copy of that. I suggest doing it. It's a good, actionable book. And I know, Brad is really seasoned in knowledge when it comes to this information. So just as we're looking to kind of wrap up here on this thought, Brad, you've shared some really great information, but maybe which one piece of advice that you'd have for someone who's on their journey right now? It doesn't necessarily have to be related to customer experience, but it can be. But just something that you've learned on your journey that you would want to pass on to someone else on theirs.
That's a great question. I always think of what do I need to do in the next 3 hours? Tomorrow's not here yet, and yesterday's signed, sealed, and delivered. What do I need to do right now? And as a leader, you've got so many things coming at you, so much on your plate. Trust your intuition and be intentional. And it always helped me to think through, look, I don't have everything sorted yet on the long term and even the medium term, but I'm engaging with my team, and I've got the next 3 hours. What can I do to be intentional about moving something forward that I know matters? Those can be the tougher things. You just need to get started, and once you do, the ball's rolling. You're on your way.
I love it. So just be really focused and intentional with your time. Take amplified action. Speaking of which, Amplifiers, if you haven't tuned in, if this is your first time checking this out, mentioned it early in the interview, but you may be just catching this now. Feel free to put in your comments or questions, and you can go to growthamplifiers.com/live to subscribe to our podcasts, upcoming lives, things of that nature. Definitely want to hear from you. Brad, it's been great having you as a guest on Growth Amplifiers. And I really appreciate you sharing some actionable insights that people can put into their business to provide a better experience and amplify overall.
Thanks so much, Kenny. A real privilege. And I love the podcast. Thank you very much for the work you're doing. Really a privilege for me to be part of it today.
Awesome. All right. Keep on amplifying, everyone. To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.